problem is how to date Buddhist art, and particularly early Buddhist art in Deccan. And this was a presentation that I made at the Tree and Serpent exhibition that was held in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and it was broadly to discuss early Buddhist art. So, so how do people date early Buddhist art anyway? What is early Buddhist art to start with? Early here refers to sort of before the first millennium, so everything that goes in sort of before the Common Era period. Art historians do it by style, and which is developmental and comparative. The other way is to do it by context, which has a sort of interdisciplinary thing about textual and material evidence sort of being adduced to date it. Amongst this textual and material evidence, we have archaeology, epigraphy, and numismatics, which is the three components that inform us. And you cannot take them one by one or independently. They are interconnected. So all these evidences that are presented to us have to be sort of contextualized with each other and then present sort of a picture. And each of these disciplines have its own problems because, so for example, epigraphy, the inscriptions that we see have dates in regular eras. They're not in any sort of continuous chronological era that we are used to. They are often dated by paleography, which can be a very subjective tool, and the condition of these inscriptions is often very poor. So you really can't people usually fight over the reading of a single letter, which can change its meaning completely. Discursively, there's been a strategy here, and most of the art historical chronology is derived and focused on dynasties. So they use dynastic terms, such as, for example, Shunga art. Shunga was supposedly a dynasty, and therefore it's sort of then, and it sort of carries on doing that. And at the backdrop, of course, there is the wider question of historical studies. How does mainstream history, what the historians are doing, how does it inform us in this task? And in that particular aspect of this period is also very problematic. For example, we know that the Mauryan Empire sort of fragmented in whatever 200 BC-ish time. But what was that nature? How did it fragment? What was the process of its fragmentation? People have been focusing on the centrality of the Mauryan Empire, whether should we focus on the centrality of the Mauryan Empire or should we focus on regions as they sort of splinter away from this central edifice, as it were, of the Mauryan Empire. Were these processes centripetal rather than centrifugal? Was there a tendency to go away from the center, and how did it pan out? So these are all the questions that are sort of a wider historical framework. And added to that, there are loads and loads of, the other problem is that many times Buddhist art, early Buddhist art particularly, is seen in as piecemeal, artifactual kind of view. So it is seen as you saw on the first slide. For example, that particular piece was excavated at Pawnee. It's a railing, it's a pillar fragment. So it is seen as a pillar fragment. It's not seen as a part of a wider archaeological structure. And in recent times, we have seen excavation and survey of a lot of structural sites, particularly in Deccan. Here are some examples of stupa sites, for example, and there's structural stupas at Supara, Elephanta, Pawnee in Vidarbha, Bhon in central Maharashtra, Ter, of course, a very famous site for the Indo-Roman sort of subject. And there are sort of very obscure sites. So, for example, there's this site called Tirth Budruk, which practically no one knows about, but it seems to have had a major structural stupa there. So there are these kind of, these archaeological sites still need a lot of investigation before we actually go back to understanding these historical processes. So what does the post-Mauryan epoch in Deccan look like? So it's basically 200 BC to 200 AD, I say, but it's basically 200 BC to 10 AD, just the first 2 centuries BC. We have a sort of given historical wisdom about it, and if you open a textbook of Indian history, you will find that it presents us a very sort of linear chronology. So, after the Mauryas come the Shungas, after the Shungas come the Kanvas, and after the Kanvas come the Satavahanas or Andhras, as they're called. So it's a very sort of linear outlining. And as I said, it's focused on these dynastic terms like Mauryans, Shungas, Kanvas, Satavahanas. They're all dynasties. But this wisdom is mainly based on textual evidence, and it is archaeologically complicated, as we saw just now. We know something about the Mauryas being in the south, and that is mainly on the basis of Ashokan inscriptions, which are used as markers, and their location and contents kind of map over what was the Mauryan Empire at that time. And the way this big empire just disappears is not very well elucidated. We don't know what exactly happened. The sequence that I told you about Maurya, Shungas, Kanvas, Andhras, or Satavahanas is essentially a Puranic sequence. It comes in it's referred to in semi-mythical dynastic texts called Puranas, which forms one of the components of the textual evidence. And there has been a question about the veracity of this sequence, of this understanding. How did it pan out? What's the chronology of it? And what is the evidential structure behind it? Basically, just because if the Puranas have a few verses that say such a thing happened, did it ever happen? What is the primacy? Where do you base your trust in charting the evidence out? And as against that, recently, in the past 30, 40 years, let's say, a materialist approach has been suggested to focus more on the material components of the evidence, such as numismatic epigraphy archaeology, rather than focusing on the text. And this whole thing historically sort of feeds into a whole debate about state formation in ancient India. How were these states formed? Where did the Satavahanas come from? Where did the Mauryas come from, for example? And historians like V.D. Chattopadhyay, Bhairavi Prasad Sahu, and Aloka Parashar Sen have talked quite in depth about this, trying to change the focus from the traditional text-based scholarship that we have been seeing to actually move away from that. So coins sort of fit into this wider debate. And when we talk about, I've put the word Mauryan into quotes, there single quotes. That's mainly because as an essential category, we really don't know what exactly is Mauryan coin. Gupta and Hardekar, in their famous book, dated a group called Series 5 to the Mauryan coins, Mauryan period. Whereas Elizabeth Errington's research on late hoards of Indian Pachmark coins that appeared in Numismatic Chronicle 2003 suggests that it is actually Series 3, which should be attributed to the Mauryan period. What is absolutely sure, although apart from all these sort of differences of opinions about what exactly is Mauryan currency, is that after the Mauryan currency started breaking down, the demise, there was an evolution of local coins. That is absolutely very clear. So those local coins appear in certain regions. Bengal, Mathura, West and East, Malwa, Vidarbha are some of these areas. And there is room to actually map these emergences of these local coinages more from this perspective. And this emergence of localized currencies is very important. It's a very important historical phenomenon. It alludes to a very important historical phenomenon because it's a testament to the spread of monetization and fiscalism. Why are these coins appearing? Because people are using them in some ways. People are using them to pay their taxes. People are using them to make payments, whatever they are, the standard functions of money that we know. And this kind of then goes along with the debates that are arguments that are being made about urbanization, state formation, and this is all where it sort of starts linking up. And these links are the important aspects that I am more concerned about. I'm more interested in charting how do coins fit in all this. Of course, like other methodologies, coins have their own problems as well. They're not problem-free. The main problem with this coinage in this period is that it is largely uninscribed. It's a symbolic coinage. They're small because they are essentially token coinages. So they rarely weigh. I mean, the bulk of the coins weigh 2 or 3 or 4 grams. They're not really big coins. And they are apart from being uninscribed, they're largely semiotic. They only have symbols on them. And there is very little archaeological data about where exactly the stratigraphic placement of these coins are. I have often found that when you look at archaeological reports, they go in sort of circular logic by using these coins as evidence for other archaeological aspects, such as pottery, and then dating pottery from coins, and then dating coins from pottery. So it sort of goes around in circles. So as a result, the archaeological placement of dating of these coins is a chronological placement in archaeology is quite imprecise. But there is hope on the horizon, because we see that there are certain specific attributive features that these coins then start to bear, which include inscriptions. So and you can have other things which we shall see. One important feature that I talk about a lot, and I've borrowed this term from organic chemistry shamelessly, it's called regiospecificity. And it's the emergence of regionally specific coin types. And this is quite an easy understanding for numismatists. So I've this slide actually shows it for non-numismatic people, what exactly is regiospecificity. But in a nutshell, it means that the distribution of coin types that you see, although they are uninscribed and small and etc., is regionally oriented. That's the crux of it. Even though a coin is of a particular type, say elephant, but elephant type coins from, say, Gangetic plains is different from the elephant type coins in, say, Vidarbha. So although for the sake of convenience and classification and attribution, we regard them as a type, a single type. In practice, they are components of regionally oriented monetary systems, and they're operating quite differently than each other. So what are the characteristics of these coinages, which we see in this time, is that they're found within a roughly definable geographic locus. They almost never travel to other regions. There are examples of coins traveling to other regions. It's not that it entirely doesn't happen, but by and large, they are specific to these regions. The other interesting thing is that there is an identifiable flavor in the intrinsic variables of the coins, such as features, what the coin actually bears onto it, and the motifs and fabric, for example. So, as I said, the execution of a elephant or a lion is quite distinct for particular regions, and sometimes, many times, you can actually see that execution, see the flavor of that execution, and attribute or understand that the coin has come from this particular region. So there is a very strong kind of correlation. And what is interesting is that also that these regions in which they are circulating, they're also characterized by the presence of at least one contemporary urban center. There are more sometimes, but there are in these regions, there is at least one contemporary urban center, and therefore it is quite likely to conclude that these coinages are part of a regionally oriented monetary system. So it's in that region these coins are operating. How does that inform us in constructing the chronology of say, subject like early Buddhist art? And there are numismatic methodologies that coins can offer us, such as the study of the type characteristics, such as manufacturing characteristics, whether the coin is die-struck, cast, punch mark, whatever. There is the phenomenon of type continuation or persistence of types, where certain coins, certain types get popular, and then they are sort of then repeated, that numismatists would know very well in this. There are, of course, manufacturing phenomena like counter-striking, which are very important because it offers us a kind of conclusive evidence to judge which of the striking authority comes first in that way. These are all the aspects which are built, vested within the coin. So they are the kind of intrinsic aspects, and then there are extrinsic aspects which are not vested in the coin itself. And one of the most important extrinsic aspect is, of course, the provenance, because that is what is telling us that this coin is regionally specific, that it's found in a certain region. There are, in many instances, you can have corroborations, interdisciplinary corroborations, such as, for example, in the Hathi Gumpha inscription is a very important inscription known from the south, which is non-Mauryan, and it has certain details in it which are then corroborated by numismatic evidence. So there is that kind of things. And again, how do these aspects then can be used to inform the chronology of art? One is actually doing interdisciplinary stylistic comparisons to see what the coins actually bear. Is that kind of reflected in art as well? And it's also, we have this distinct observation that the choice of motifs that the coins bear are again drawn from a cultural collective, which is also reflected in art. So there is a kind of alignment between these two components of evidence. Regionally mapping these coins, we find that these are sort of zones of uninscribed local coinages, particularly in the Deccan. And these are, of course, they're not by any means concrete lines, but these are kind of these are some of the areas and you can see that some of them do overlap with each other. And you have four regions here. You have proper Vidarbha, you have South Vidarbha and North Telangana, you have central Maharashtra, which is Marathwada, and eastern Vidarbha, and you have the Khandesh and lower Narmada Valley towards the northwest of Deccan. So these are the four areas in which we do find these uninscribed local coinages, each with its own regional flavors. And here are some examples, and you can see that immediately that they are quite distinct in their appearance, in their fabric, in the choice of their metals, how they are manufactured, in which way. These are only representative examples. There are, in each of these areas, there are many more, maybe perhaps in tens, if not in hundreds, different coin types in circulation, but each of them do have a sort of collective flavor of their things. What is also significant is that when the coins start bearing inscriptions, they tell us something about regional polities emerging, which are not monarchical or kingship oriented. So we have, for example, we have issues which actually bear the names of regions on them. So we have these two examples which have recently been published by Prashant Kulkarni in Ellen Raven's Festschrift as well. We have these examples of coins which have the names Benakata and Bhojakata on them. So can you see my cursor? Mm. So here, so the name Bhojakata is written here about this coin, and Benakata is actually part of this punch here. So it's a punch marked inscribed coin from Vidarbha, and there's the name of Benakata. Now, quite interestingly, both these places are known from inscriptions, and those are the two inscriptions that you see down there, illustrated from Bharhut. And we can see the example illustrated in the slide there. That is also a pillar from Bharhut, which shows the representation of Muchalinda Naga, the snake in Buddhist art, and that is from a donation which is by a nun who came from Benakata. So Benakata and Bhojkata are both areas which are known from inscriptions and now on coins. So there is, it adds another layer of information about us. What is also interesting is that in this area we also have city-state issues. So here are examples of two city-states, Bhadravati and Bhadrapurika. Now it is quite interesting to have that particular word Bhadra coming as a part of both these city-state names, because as we shall see in a minute, there was a dynasty in which there were kings whose names were appended by the same word. so whose names ended in the same word. So there was a king called Damabhadra, for example. So there is this kind of connection between region, people, dynasties, localities, polities coming up, and then getting reflected in numismatic evidence. The top two coins are of Bhadravati city-state. The lower coin is of Bhadrapurika city-state. Bhadravati has been tentatively identified with the site of Bhandak, which is in eastern Maharashtra. Bhadrapurika possibly was the name given to the site of Pauni, which we saw in the first slide. There's a stupa site. These then subsequently give rise to monarchical issues, which have the names of kings on them. Not all of the kings have the appellation king inscribed next to them. So there is always a possibility that some of these individuals might not be kings, but maybe other individuals of other centers of power in any way. But lots of them do have the title king attached before their name. And the very aspect of coin design that actually comes up here is that the fact that coins start having inscriptions tells us something, and it's the advent of script culture. And this is very significant when there is very little other inscriptional evidence on hand from this period. So coin inscriptions, for whatever worth they are our largest body of written corpus that comes out of this period. We know that there are several ruling entities who strike coins in their names, which are unknown to other branches of material evidence. So there is no evidence of any of these names coming from any other branch at all. There is a distinct connection between the choice of symbols that some of these people tend to use, and it is kind of attributed or linked with a semiotic representation of identity. Some of these symbols then become dynastic symbols. So they become sort of associated with groups of kings, and they keep on using those. So it's something like that. Now, it is quite interesting to actually underpin or explore further what exactly this identity is. Is it a regional identity? Do those symbols allude to regional identities? Or is it dynastic? Is clan related, family related? Or is it indeed religious identities? Are they Buddhist or whatever symbols? So it's from that perspective, this opens a very important branch of evidence for us to investigate further. You can see, as we will see in the slides feature, that there is an intersection of these choices being made, and they're intentional. The numismatic typology and its connection can be made with clan or kinship identities much better than others. What does it tell us? The first thing it tells us is that it's a much more complicated political picture, a much more varied mosaic that does not really conform to our received wisdom that we saw, the single line, Mauryas, Kanwas, blah, 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 that kind of thing that is happening with the postmodern political landscape. This is a much more complicated picture. And there is some evidence available for building internal chronologies here, so we know what is happening with these things. It's not as completely, we are staring into a complete unknown as far as this goes. So what are these regional polities? Again, a rough map and color-coded of where do these regional polities emerge in terms of coins that we know of. So there is Vidarbha, of course, comes again in prominence, and there are two groups of kings there whose names end in Mitra and Bhadra. There is a Sebaka-related group because one of the issues names a king called Sebaka, and then there are other kings called Viga and Kukutakada, which kind of add to that. There is probably a different group of Mitra kings coming from central Maharashtra. Then there are individual kings. One of them is called Katahadi, and one of them is called Patala Todata. These we don't actually know if they belong to, we don't know their dynastic terms. Their coinages are quite interesting because they are quite distinct. They are individual coinages. They are not part of any big groups. And then lastly, along the sort of South Vidarbha Telangana border, there is the Kotalingala group, which is Kotalingala is a site where these coins were first found. So I've called them Kotalingala group. And we'll see how what these happens. What is quite interesting is that in terms of linking with Buddhist art, with the presence of Katahadi, we have the first ever connection, direct connection with an inscription which mentions a donor. So this was first pointed by Chandrasekhar Gupta of Nagpur, who's the retired head of the Department of Ancient Indian History and Culture Department in Nagpur University. And it was quite a significant observation. So we have to acknowledge him as for spotting this. And this inscription is engraved at the entrance, the portico of cave number 10 at Ajanta. And it mentions a person called Vasitiputta Katahadi. Of course, there is no title king here, so we can absolutely not be sure that this is the same, but probably in all probability it is, because not all of his coins do also bear the title king. So it's on his coins he's known with the title and without the title. But here we have inscriptionally, he is paleographically everything matches really, to cut a long story short. And it's quite likely that the coins that bear the name Katahadi and the person who donated this, the facade of this cave at cave number 10 at Ajanta, were most likely the same people. So this is the first ever connection, a direct connection between numismatic evidence and epigraphic evidence and a Buddhist site that go hand in hand at this point. And this is quite significant because cave number 10 at Ajanta is indeed the earliest cave that was excavated at Ajanta. So it fits in with that kind of analysis as well. Here are some examples of the coins of Katahadi. And you can see that the ones on the left-hand side have this very distinct double-lined kind of symbols on the reverse. And one of them is an Andipada symbol, and the other one is a Srivatsa symbol. Of course, there are all these symbols which are drawn from the same cultural collective, as I said, triangulated standard or whatever. They are all there. The coins on the right-hand side are from Western Maharashtra. In fact, I noticed that a couple of these were actually excavated in the site of Nevasa, which is probably the best excavation report that we have for this period is the Nevasa excavation report. Unfortunately, the numismatic part of that report is fairly botched, I would say, and there are lots of misattributions. But if you actually go back to the plates, you can see that there are coins of Katahadi in it, which have obviously been misattributed or misidentified. So, that is that's another story of how the evidence can be misinterpreted and can lead people astray completely from a viewpoint. So Katahadi seems to be a powerful ruler in central Maharashtra, and he seems to have issued coins in west as well as east parts of the central Maharashtra Deccan, as it were. And here the examples are here. In Vidarbha, as I said, there are two groups. One is of Mitra kings, and the other one is of Bhadra kings. They issue coins in a variety of manufacturing styles. So they have punchmark coins, which are inscribed. Some of them are uninscribed and can be sort of attributed to the same group by symbolic sort of comparison. But here we have some examples. So there's Bhumi Mitra, who's striking coins in punchmark style. There's also Kanha Mitra, who strikes punchmarks as well as die-struck coins. And then there is Surya Mitra, which is quite important here because, as we shall see, he then connects with the Satavahanas as his sort of successors. Examples of Bhadra coins, we have kings such as Damabhadra, Satyabhadra, Dharmabhadra, and Satyabhadra. There are two series which are quite distinct in their appearance. So one tends to think that there might be two Satyabhadras. There is Satyabhadra the first and Satyabhadra the second. So there is this group. There are, apart from these two sort of dynastic groups which have sort of names and prefixes, suffixes given to they share them as Mitras and Bhadras. There's a whole group of other guys who do not have that. So they have Ayadatta, Ashwabudha. There are these coins with the name Seyaso written on them. Whether that is the name of a place or a person, we really don't know. They are again quite distinct. There is a person called Subena, which is again like does not have a dynastic ending to his name. And then of course there's as I said that there's this person called Patala Toraka, which functions in these areas as well. Further to the east, in the region of Marathwada and central Maharashtra or East Vidarbha, we have coins of other groups of people. So there is Bhumi Mitra there as well, which possibly is a different Bhumi Mitra. We don't know as yet. But there is Usava Mitra, and then there is this guy called Bala Mitra, who again strikes coins in different types. So much like Katahadi and Patala Toraka. This is a coin. This is a king that is sort of spreading its areas slightly wider than the rest. Towards the south of Vidarbha, we have a group of kings, which is again you can see immediately find the characteristics on the reverse that there are this double line Nandipada like symbol, and there are three kings in this group: Sebaka, Viga, and Kukutakada, which share that kind of repertoire of these double line symbols on the reverse, and also the typology. Most of these coins are of bull type, so bull walking to right is a prominent symbol. So as I said, some of these do give us examples of or hints of some sort of internal type chronology, and one of them is the type connection. So for example, the punch mark coins in the name of Damabhadra and Aswabudha do have exactly the same punches on them, apart from the inscription. So they must be somehow closer to each other or related to each other. The same thing can happen, you see the same thing happening between Satyabhadra and Subena. They're practically the same types. So again, there's possibility that they might be somehow connected to each other. Katahadi and Kukutakada are again showing the same kind of type connections between the two. That's the last three coins there. You can immediately see that they are very much in the same type. So either it suggests a chronological proximity, or it suggests proximity in space. So it's time and space kind of context here, and that's what is happening. What is more significant, of course, is the counter strikes that actually should tell us the order in which some of these kings might have come. So we have Satyabhadra the first, probably counter striking coins of Damabhadra. So he probably existed as a contemporary or Damabhadra or his successor, but not his predecessor. That is quite clear. Dharmabhadra is counter-striking Satyabhadra, so you see it's probably possibly Damabhadra, Satyabhadra, Dharmabhadra is the order in which these kings come. And then interestingly, when the Satavahanas emerge in this area, they strike coins of the predecessor dynasties, and we have coins. When I did my thesis, we only knew of coins of Satakarni which were counter-striking Suryamitra from Vidarbha, but now we also know of coins of Satakarni which are counterstruck on Dharmabhadra. So that actually tells us possibly that these Mitra and Bhadra kings were also kind of coexisting in different pockets with each other, because the same king is then counterstriking coins from two different groups. So these are exceptional evidences as far as to actually know what this mosaic was composed of. There is a word to be said about the iconography of these coins and also the parallelisms that we see. The motifs that the coins choose are symbolic, iconic, and animate, or three kinds. And they do evolve, as we saw in the slides, they do reveal a programmatic design here. And it's usually consisting of motifs associated with kingship, authority, legitimacy, whatever that thing is. And some of this symbolism, as I said, might be clan and kingship related. Whether that means dynastic or not, it's a wider historical question, but definitely it exists. There is, in animate or anthropoid depictions, there is a preponderance of certain deities or sects that you see. There is possibly representations of yakshas and yakshis. There is Lakshmi or Gajalakshmi or Abhishek Lakshmi is another kind of prominent icon that is emerged. There are references to Pancharatra or Vrishni heroes by symbolism, like plow and wheel that appear on these coins. There is also representation of a river goddess, a woman standing with a pair of fish in her hand. And there is a kind of indexical or symbolic representation or reference to skanda as well. So they are drawing from a pantheon of sorts at this time. And it is quite interesting that early Buddhist art also draws from the same pantheon. And this is what distinguishes early Buddhist art, that the kind of figurative depictions that you see in early Buddhist art are often not essentially Buddhist in their way. They're drawn from this floating repertoire of regional, local deities, which deal with fertility, which deal with propitiation, which deal with guardianship, that kind of thing. So there are, of course, in spite of that, there are certain symbols which might be Buddhist in their nature, such as a tree, a Buddhist tree, wheels, or indeed animals like elephant or lion, which are very connected with Buddha's representations. So there is a constant dialogue with the cultural collective here, from which art, monumental art, sculptural art, and coins both draw. So they're picking up these things from it. And the main problem with numismatic depiction, and why we can't really compare it directly with artistic representation, is because numismatic depiction is unfortunately quite stylized. Because coins are small, so things get simplified and stylized. And this is because the functionality and the technology of coin production and coin use really that is a barrier to actually see these parallelisms in more detail. So I'm going to do this conclusion, but then there are a few more slides just to show some more coins. And so the backdrop for early Buddhist art in the Deccan is also the formative period for Deccan to emerge as a socio-political entity in the postmodern period. This is quite significant because the emergence of this region itself as a politically charged region has close connections with patronage, trade networks. All the things that happen as backdrops to Buddhist sites are driven by the emergence of Deccan as a socio-political entity. The constituent processes of state formation, which kind of emergence of clan and kingship related polities, which is evident from the names, the onomastic that these people use on their coins, and also from a shared repertoire of symbols, some of which then emerge as dynastic symbols. So that is very, very clear. What we saw in those maps is the spatial mapping of these polities, which we can base on numismatic evidence. And this actually underlines the importance of regions in charting trajectories of urbanization, struggle for political power, what was happening politically in these regions, etc. The numismatic characteristic of regiospecificity, which is marked geographic orientation of coin types, it helps us establishing these regions. And this is quite significant because the historians who are focusing on regions, the role of regions in this whole story, often grapple with what those regions could be. They know that regions played an important role, but how do you define a region? So there, I go away from their methodology because there, I think they do it wrongly because they go back to the textual evidence and try to map these regions for the regions which are mentioned in the text, such as Janapadas, for example, for which we have no particular evidence in terms of its exactness. We know it as a term, but not in its exactness. Coins, on the other hand, offer us regions which are far more concrete in terms of their spread, their usage, their issuance, and therefore I would argue for using numismatically informed regions as a trope for investigation in this kind of region-centric analysis of the postmodern period. So therefore, coins are quite important because they help us bring these regions into an actual picture. We don't have to rely on vague terms of like Janapadas or whatever. It is also significant because it helps us. Coins are very important because they help us in giving a spatio-temporal placement of political and social processes. What is exactly happening in terms of we see from those counter strikes, for example, there are hints at what exactly is, and this is what sets the backdrop for early Buddhist art, and that's why it is quite significant. And lastly, we have to accept that on this picture that we see is at a total variance from the received wisdom of a linear narrative. There is no shine of shungas, for example, here at all. I mean, shunga comes just as a attributive term. It need not be an essential historical term in so far as at least these things are concerned. So it sort of begs us to refine our nomenclature. Why should we use terminologies as shunga art, for example, because who were the shungas anyway? So it sort of opens up a very different perspective. And just as a matter of interest, these are some of these examples. So, for example, I told you about gods and goddesses. 3 examples of executing Gajalakshmis, which are from central Maharashtra, and you can see that they are quite cute. They're very stylized. They are and one of the most interesting aspect of this provincial regional coinage is that almost every coin is unique. There is such a lot of variation. You cannot do a die study because they are just, every coin is different. Absolutely every coin is different. A very interesting shift in depiction where the Lakshmi, the figurative anthropomorphic goddess, is here represented only as a symbol. So this is again for people who do visual religion, this is quite interesting because symbol and human form can be interchanged. And it's quite unique that in that way that a symbol is kind of inserted in what is usually an animate program of coin design. So here we have the symbol Srivatsa, which is being anointed by 2 elephants on either side. Similarly, on the last coin, which is on the lower right here, there is a symbol of an arrowhead, which is in a railing, which is being anointed by elephants as well. And the same thing you can see on the one on the left as well. On the obverse of the coin on the lower left, there is a standing goddess with a pair of fish in her hand with a wavy line next to it. And of course, this is kind of an allusion to a river goddess. Here we see more representations of the river goddess. Some of them are very difficult to understand, particularly when they are in small punches. So I just sort of circled them. And here you can see, well, I don't know whether you can see or not, probably not. But where here I can see a woman with one hand on the hip and the other hand extended outwards, and she's holding a pair of fish in her hand. On the coin on the lower left, you can see her fairly clearly. And if you compare that with the top depictions, you can probably make some comparisons. As I said, this is the problem because coins depictions are very stylized. So even though in its kind of rudimentary form, it is the same figure, woman, hand on hip, other hand holding pair of fish, it sort of gets stylized, and you've got to have some degree of imagination in certain cases, particularly when it is not fully visible. Representations of other gods and goddesses which are symbolic. So here you have a cockerel standard, which is concerned with Skanda, and of course the plow and wheel, which were concerned with the Vrishni or Pancharatra hero religious system. So you have representations of these other religious systems as well. And again, these are Satavahana coins with the same depiction, Gajalakshmi. So what I'm trying to say here is that these are then carried over when the Satavahanas come in the picture. These deities then sort of, the repertoire is then sort of continued on their coins. Sometimes the representation are strikingly similar to sculptural representation. So, for example, here is a Gajalakshmi on a Satavahana coin up there, and below here is a sculptural frieze, which is currently in the CSMVS Museum, Mumbai, of the same depiction. And they are so similar to each other that one wonders whether somebody might have seen this and then gone and made a coin out of it. So it's absolutely that kind of similarities there. More similarities, I won't go into details because the images are quite horrible. But what I'm trying to show here is that there are rarer depictions of Gajalakshmi seated in profile. On most coins, you see her as frontal, either seated or standing, but as frontal. But there are some rare depictions where she is seated in profile. And then again, you have the same depiction of Gajalakshmi seated in profile on this piece of ivory comb that was found at the site of Ter in excavations in central Maharashtra. So, again, there is this kind of connection between numismatic depictions and other forms of art, not necessarily religious or monumental art, but utilitarian art as well. And then there are, so this is a fragment of another pillar. It's kind of a complementary pillar that we saw at the very beginning of the presentation. This is in CSMVS Mumbai. The one that we saw at the beginning is in the National Museum in Delhi, and then was sent to New York for the exhibition as a kind of a frontispiece. When we entered the exhibition, that was the first thing that you saw. Here you have a very interesting 3D depiction of a wish-fulfilling tree. You can see that the tree is venerated again with an umbrella at the top, and one person is venerating it, propitiating it. And then it's dropping a flower, and the other person is catching it in a pot, in a dish that he's holding above its head. So this is obviously the tree granting a boon or a wish to its propitiator. What is quite interesting is that such 3D depictions are quite rare, and you can see again this is a coin from similar area of the ruler Damabhadra, and you see a very similar 3D depiction on the coin as well. So that kind of comparison one can draw between these depictions. Lastly, I wanted to show these two figurines, which are quite interesting because probably they are the earliest bronzes found in Deccan. And here we have the much better representation of the goddess holding a pair of fish, and also a standing boy, Skanda, who is holding a cockerel in his hand. So, and these are probably 150 BC-ish, and maybe the earliest representations of figurative bronze art in the Deccan at this time. So very, very significant objects currently in a private collection. So anyway, so that sort of concludes the story and, contextually aligning it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir.